Humans fight. It's a sad fact. Ground force fighting has been part of human history for thousands of years, with the first standing army traced back to ancient Greece. Over the years, armies have developed quirks that have made them stand out. Some are terrifying, some are ridiculous. In today's video, we're talking about the 10 most unusual armies of all time. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to The Supreme, and click the notification bell for more lit content. Let's get rolling. The Red Team. Okay, so this is actually wild. The French army is compiling what is effectively a sci-fi army of writers and creatives to draw up possible futuristic attack scenarios. The visionaries have been given the unofficial title of the Red Team, and it's their job to think outside the box when it comes to potential threats. They then have to role-play scenarios to imagine how would-be attackers might conduct their offensives and how the French army might reasonably respond. It seems that the Red Team were the brains behind futuristic weapons on display at the 2019 Bastille Day celebration. These insane-looking weapons are anti-drone guns, but they kinda look like comedy rifles to me. There was also a soldier with a gun on a hoverboard flying over a military parade. Wild. Norse berserkers. Have you ever heard the term going berserk? It's kinda like going postal. Well, the term comes from the name of Norse warriors who would fight like madmen in a battle. The Norse berserkers were unlike a lot of other armies out there. They didn't wear armor for protection, but instead they wore animal skins and stuffed animals' heads as helmets. They are recorded in history as having fought in a trance-like frenzied state, acting like wild animals themselves by howling and biting their shields. The ancient army was described in a 13th century poem as being mad as dogs or wolves and strong as bears or wild oxen. Their blind and ferocious rage may have been induced by hallucinogens from wild mushrooms, although some accounts have them transforming into a werewolf-like fashion by the power of the Norse god Odin. Either way, by all accounts, you would not have wanted to meet a berserker on the battlefield. Pontifical Swiss Guard. So, you know how we just talked about the berserkers and how they were all fierce looking and wore animal skins and stuff? Yeah? Well, Switzerland kinda went in a different direction. Behold, the fearsome Pontifical Swiss Guard. Sorry, I couldn't help it. These dudes deserve as much respect as any other official army. But look at their uniform. They literally look like court jesters from the Renaissance. The Swiss Guard is the army that protects the Pope in the Apostolic Palace, so these are the military of Vatican City, which is in Italy, not Switzerland, just to add an extra level of confusion. The recruits have to be unmarried Swiss Catholic males between the age of 19 to 30 and have to be trained in Switzerland, again, just to confuse things. I'm sure there's a long and winding history as to why Swiss men in clown costumes have to protect the Pope, but I think I've seen all I need to see here. Again, no disrespect, but are we sure this is the best army to protect the Pope? Any Swiss or Italian people watching? Can you help explain this to a confused American dude? Queen's Guard. Okay, Britain, you're up. Meet the Queen's Guard. They are infantry and cavalry soldiers who protect the British royal residences in the UK. I need more information on these hats. What? Why? Google tells me, much to the chagrin of organizations like PETA, these fur hats date back to the 1700s and are made from the skin of Canadian black bears. The thing is with the hats though, like, can they actually see out from underneath them? Aren't they kinda in the way? The Queen's Guard are a popular tourist attraction. Many people flock to Buckingham Palace or Windsor Palace just to get a look at them. Famously, they're tasked with not reacting to the public, so people often go try and taunt them. The Queen's Guard may look a bit ridiculous, but make no mistake, they are fully operational British soldiers. Their hats may be funny, but the assault rifles they're carrying certainly aren't. They will shoot to kill. In fact, a palace guard nearly shot the Queen as she took a 3 a.m. walk through the grounds. The Potsdam Giants. Prussian King Frederick William I confessed that tall soldiers were his weakness. The 18th century king became obsessed with creating an army of tall men in uniform, the Potsdam Grenadiers. Men were expected to be over 6 feet, and the taller they were, the more they were paid. They were given 18-inch caps to add to their height, but weirdly, their main duty was to parade around the king, rather than actually fight. The tallest man in the giant army was a 7-foot, 1-inch half Irishman by the name of James Kirkland. Kirkland had been working in London when he was kidnapped and forced into the Potsdam Grenadiers. Often members of the army had been kidnapped too. Some tried to escape their captors, and, well, you can imagine what happened to them. Oh, and there was also a bear in the army, a real bear. He was their mascot. They just don't make mad kings like they used to. Am I right? King Frederick was so consumed by his tall army that he was said to have stretched some of the men out on a rack, which had been a popular medieval torture method. He had hoped to make his men even bigger, but unfortunately, a lot of them just died in the process. It's also said that the king forcibly bred the tall men with tall women in the town in hope of producing more recruits for his future armies. The Terracotta Army. Armies don't always involve actual people. Sometimes they're symbolic. King Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, believed he would continue to rule in the afterlife and therefore had a large army buried with him when he died in around 210 BC. Thankfully, the emperor did not try to have his actual army buried. Instead, he had statues made to represent his forces. In total, the king had 8,000 soldiers, 130 chariots, 520 horses, and 150 cavalry horses buried in formation with him. The army laid forgotten in a field until it was discovered thousands of years later by farmers digging a water well. Eventually, after heavy excavation, the figures were fully uncovered. They're pretty menacing to look at. Parts of the Terracotta Army have gone on tour around the world, but most have stayed where they were found, near the city of Xi'an. The spot became a World Heritage Site in 1987. Hiro Onoda. This is a one-man army all of his own. After the end of World War II in 1945, Hiro Onoda did not surrender. He was a high-ranking military man, holding the rank of second lieutenant in the Imperial Japanese Army, and just before the end of the war, he was sent to the Lubang Islands in the Philippines. He had been told that he was under no circumstances to surrender, and if he was ever found in a position where he had to, he should take his own life. When the Americans and Philippine Commonwealth landed in 1945, Onoda took to the mountains and carried out guerrilla tactics. He did not believe the news that the war was over. He believed that it was a trick from the Allies, so he kept on hiding out. Eventually, in 1974, he met a young Japanese man who told him the war was really over. But Onoda said he would not surrender until he received orders from a superior officer. Eventually, his commanding officer was located, having since become a bookseller. He flew out to Lubang Island and officially relieved Onoda of his duties nearly 30 years after the war had ended. Skeleton Army. While tribes are far more primitive than established countries, they still have their own armies. They may not have warplanes, tanks, and guns, but they do have other ways of scaring and intimidating people. Meet the Chifu skeleton tribe of Papua New Guinea, and it seems that the tribe paint themselves as skeletons in order to intimidate enemies and to lead them to believe they are not human. In some ways, they are a lot like the Berserkers, who were also tribesmen, but just alive many hundreds of years ago. During an annual festival, the tribe enacts a battle while painted in the macabre markings. I honestly think I'd be more scared of these guys than I would most of the armies on this list. The Ghost Army. It turns out Adolf Hitler was very afraid of ghosts. Okay, actually, the Ghost Army isn't as spooky as it sounds. It was actually a stroke of genius. The Ghost Army was officially termed the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, and their job was tactical deception. They weren't a real army at all. They were a small group of actors with wooden horses, inflatable tanks, and rubber airplanes. Their main focus was causing chaos and confusion, which I can kinda get behind. The Ghost Army staged a series of shows, They would perform fake battlefield moves like marching convoys that would loop around the block as if to create the effect of an entire infantry on the move. They also had sound effects, which would be blasted in the French countryside. There were also actors who were employed to simply dress as soldiers from various regiments to create confusion and to spread false gossip to spies. There was a spoof radio where actors impersonated real military radio, and they also faked Morse code. The overall effect was to trick Hitler and the Power Axis into thinking the Allied forces were much bigger than they were. It turns out that the art of war was painted so well that Hitler was intimidated. Robot Army. It was recently reported that by year 2025, the US military will have more combat robots than human soldiers. There are currently over 1 million soldiers in the American Army. Just to put that into perspective, is the news seriously telling me that the US will have over 1 million robots, or will the robots start replacing the humans? Jeez. Of all the sentences I thought that I'd have to say today. So let's get a look at these robots, shall we? This is Atlas, a robot built by Boston Dynamics with funding from US Defense. Atlas was designed for search and rescue missions, but the most recent update is that it can perform handstands and somersaults. Atlas may look kind of friendly, but how about this robot featured on the Corridor YouTube channel? Looks pretty terrifying, right?
Outro?
That was the 10 most unusual armies of all time. Which one of these on this list today was your favorite? Make sure you comment down below and let us know. You've been watching The Supreme. We'll see you next time.